What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? I had 2 job offers in different states at the same time. The one I didn't take was offering more money, but I just didn't gel with the guy who would be my boss and really liked the guy who would be my boss at the lower offer. The better offer was in a state I had always wanted to live in, for a company I admired, but something felt off, so I went with the lower offer. I ended up meeting my wife in the city of the lower offer. Meanwhile, the company that had given me the higher offer abruptly closed and laid off their entire staff with no severance, so if I had taken that I would have been stuck on the other side of the country with no job and no money. Similar story, 2 offers, one for a little more money, the other had way better retirement plan. The interview for the good benefits company just didn't feel right. Like the interviewer was trying to convince me not to take it. I took the other offer, and the good benefits company merged with another company, moved half their workforce to a 1-company town in BFE, Ohio, and laid off the rest. My interviewer at that company ended up becoming my coworker at the other company, and his manager ended up being his and my manager at the other company. Not the biggest bullet I've ever dodged, but I had to walk away from the interview process from one of my dream companies because I had been out of work for a year and I had another offer from a smaller, less prestigious company and couldn't hold out with no income any longer. I tried asking the dream company if we could speed up the process due to the competing offer, but they could not. The dream company was in entertainment and laid off a ton of people when the pandemic hit. The job I took was doing the same role, but in real estate, which boomed during the pandemic. Also, my ex ended up getting a job at the dream company. Kind of nice to not have to work next to her. And no wife. A literal one. A friend was showing off some handguns he bought with his first paycheck, checked the chamber to make sure nothing was there, sighted at me, and pulled the trigger. Of course, the gun was loaded. Bullet passed over my right shoulder and buried itself in a chair. We aren't friends anymore for some odd reason. Edit. Well, this blew up more than expected. Thank you for all the well wishes. I'm fine other than minor deafness in my right ear. Edit 2. It was a 9mm semi-auto made in Serbia. Other than that, I have no idea. Gun safety is something everyone should learn before buying them. Glad you're okay, man. He probably had the magazine loaded, and by checking the chamber he racked the slide and chambered the round. For anyone reading this, do not operate the action of any firearm unless the magazine is removed and the safety is in the on position. Edit. One of the big rules of gun safety is don't point guns at people unless you intend to use them. Every gun is always loaded. Absolute first rule of gun safety. They are exactly the type of person who should not own firearms whatsoever. Glad that they have terrible aim though. Once at a bar, a woman was surprisingly into me as we danced. If I had had more confidence back then, I definitely could've taken her home. In the end, one of my karaoke buddies ended up with her instead and got caught by her husband that night. I knew a guy that got stabbed by the husband after he went home with a woman. Apparently she liked seeing the husband go crazy on the dudes she brought home. That's something I don't understand. If you're the husband and your wife cheats on you, don't flip out on the guy hot with your wife. Flip out on the one who cheated the wife. The guy likely feels just as cheated on as you do. For some reason, most guys want to fight the other guy like they are fighting over the woman who neither of them want anymore anyway, and it makes no sense. I broke my lease and moved out of a terrible apartment complex I was living in to move back home because I was broke. 2 weeks later, the whole complex burned to the ground from a meth lab and another unit. A few edits for some commonly asked questions. The apartment was right outside of downtown Birmingham. I didn't have renter's insurance, broke 20Y/0 at the time, so wouldn't have got any kickback from that. I did end up getting my security deposit back, which they said I had forfeit by breaking the lease, so that was nice. That meth lab wasn't mine. I packed mine up and brought it back to Florida with me where it belonged. I have a similar one. I broke a lease to move home due to being broke. During the course of that lease there were multiple murders and break-ins all throughout the complex. My apartment was on the first floor, so easy break-in. Edit. For those concerned, it wasn't like a serial killer or anything, just an explosion of gang violence. My apartment was in the ghetto outside of Dallas. That time I didn't go along for the ride when a friend of mine was running weed years ago. Back when it was more illegal. I was bored and unemployed at the time and passed on this trip because I had to go to a job interview to be a zombie for Halloween festivities at an amusement park. I got the job. My friend got arrested and did 30 days in jail. That sounds like an awesome job. My friend and I evacuated New Orleans 2 days before Hurricane Katrina and drove to Mississippi with the little money we had. We were trying to decide on where to stay for the night, and it was between a mid-range hotel or the really cheap motel. Decided to spend a little more for the hotel. During the night the eye of the storm came through Mississippi and flattened the roof of the motel we decided against. My mom wasn't going to leave for Katrina. I told her I was going to take me and my little sister and hitchhike if she didn't pack the car and leave within the hour. My dad didn't leave and he ended up on the roof with our neighbor because our house got flooded. No way all of us would have survived. Katrina decimated my town. Everything 2 miles inland or less was destroyed. In 1996, my parents were deciding between 2 houses to move into. They picked the new construction that resulted in being placed on shoddy soil and years of lawsuits when we ultimately moved in 2001. Anyway, the other house they cold picked presumably on better soil. Wold placed my older sister at Columbine High School as a freshman for the 1998 to 1999 school year. Reading this at first like this doesn't seem like a dodged bullet. I guess she dodged a bullet in more ways than one. This escalated in a way that I would never expect. I got on an intercity bus and almost sat in the middle, but moved and sat at the back. The bus later collided with a truck and got opened up like a tin can. If I had sat where I originally intended I would have been killed. I was late to my bus and instead of running to catch it, I decided to miss it and it was later hit by a speeding truck. Caught the one behind it and later saw the aftermath. 2 people died. High school GF wanted to talk about baby names. I was headed to college. No thoughts of being a parent. My mom even found a note in my pocket listing her favorites if we had a boy. Anyway, we broke up after 2 years. The next guy she dated was a dad within 9.5 MOs. She was gonna baby trap you. Yikes. My ex-girlfriend moved out of my house a day before the first lockdown in Spain. She previously pulled a knife on me. Dude, thank God. I was booked on Pan Am Flight 103 which went down over Lockerbie, Scotland. I didn't have a premonition or anything supernatural. I just decided to cancel my seat. Didn't think anything of it until the plane went down and my mother had written down my flight plan and reminded me. This was back in the day when you could cancel without a penalty up to a couple of days in advance. Edit, you know. When I posted my response I didn't realize how many comments I would get that involved people who were impacted by this sad event. On any given day, we make decisions for no concrete reason really, like, I just chose not to go that day and we come to learn it was a good decision. I try not to evaluate my decision because I don't want to affect my future decisions by second guessing or trying to work the odds. This is only one example of times that I dodged a significant bullet. I wrote a different post, but erased it before I hit save. Pro tip, to avoid the few days away cancellation fees, call or go online and reschedule the flight for a week or 2 out. Then wait a day and cancel. Not me. A Dutch mate of mine living in Tasmania had to visit his sick mum in Amsterdam, booking his flight online. He said to his wife, you know, I'm sick of flying Malaysian Airlines. The food is deuce. The hostels are miserable. It'll cost more. But I'm booking with Singapore. So, instead of dying on MH17, he was on a plane 40 kilometers ahead of it. Edit. Just to clarify, he was on way home from AMS. Butterfly effect. If someone at Malaysia had made a better menu he could have died. Sold my bar and grill business in August 2019. Sold my 3 restaurants in February 2020. For way more than they were worth. Now 2 have closed. I almost fell for a pyramid scheme in high school. My friend brought me to one of their meetings ACN, and I was so on board. But my parents talked me down. I was upset at them until I learned more about MLMs and quickly changed my mind. Sometimes I imagine where it'd be now if I went through with it. It wouldn't be pretty. That's for sure. Wow, I remember ACN. What a sham. The exact same thing happened to me. Different pyramid scheme, but same story. I was young, without a job or any job education. Had previously been fired from my apprenticeship, so I was pretty desperate. A friend of mine was approached by someone he knew about this new company that needed motivated young people and didn't require any particular training. So we decided to check it out. Everybody was super nice and sounded like they knew what they were talking about. It wasn't a traditional pyramid scheme either, or at least it didn't sound like one, because at no point did they tell us to recruit others. Also, it was none of that network marketing bullpoop where there's a huge load of buzzwords with no actual talk about what you're going to be doing. Instead, it was about insurance, which to a young and inexperienced person sounded respectable enough. So we were basically tasked to start talking up this insurance stuff to people. And they told us a good place to start would be our parents. The experience of me trying to tell my parents about how great this poop was and that they should get it basically just to help me out, only to be shut down by them and be told that I was falling for a pyramid scheme has to be one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. I was pissed at first, and after I realized what I had almost gotten into, I was terribly ashamed. My parents made me feel incredibly stupid, and it was the best thing they could ever have done for me. I have recently been watching the sister of a close friend of mine get into a pyramid scheme, and I kept wondering how you could be so stupid until I remembered that I almost went down the same road. And X200B. Edit. Many people think this was Pramerica. It was not. I'm from Germany. It was a German company. But from what I can gather, it functions basically the exact same way. Physically, a bus. I grew up in Bermuda, and since it is such a small island, cars are limited to one per family, and everyone drives mopeds. I was driving into town and came up to a red light behind a bus. As is tradition, I scooted around the bus to be in the front of the line of traffic. Literally 2 seconds later, a second bus smashed into the back of the first bus at like 30 miles per hour. I would have been pancaked, without question. 100% dead. I just sat on the side of the road for a bit and thought about my mortality. Edit. Thank you for the awards. My only other Bermuda bus-based encounter was driving home from my first job in the rain. An oncoming bus in the opposite lane went through a massive puddle and sent what looked like a tidal wave of water right at me. It literally picked me and my little Yamaha V50 right up and swept us off the road onto some grass. So I guess in the end it was me, one bus is one. Yep. This is why lane splitting for motorcycles/scooters is essential. Rear end accidents kill a lot of riders. It's crazy how 1 second life is in front of you, then nothing. I was in an accident in my motorcycle a few years ago. Last thing I remember before paramedics arrived was saying OFU, it changes your perspective on life. Bermuda is where I lost my fear of walking down the road next to a 10-foot wall with a dump truck driving past me in the same lane in which I'm walking. And not physically. Bermuda looks interesting. Just out of curiosity, what's the crime rate like there? I bet it's incredibly low. Cool, my family is from Bermuda too. I've never gone, want to, but my dad and aunts/uncles still go often. Having been to Bermuda several times, I can vividly picture this, and you deserve every upvote. Same. But a car in New York City. My pregnant wife had been craving Thai food, so I took a different way to the bus, grabbed the food, and made my way through 6th. I went through a crosswalk. I had the walk sign that had one lane with backed up traffic. Just out of caution, I peeped my head out rather than walk straight through, and some dirtbag zoomed through the red light at 50 miles per hour. Nearly took my head off. If I hadn't have checked and just walked through, I'd have been dead, no doubt. One of those things that annoyed me at the time, and I didn't realize how close I'd been until about 10 minutes later. I was out kayaking on a lake and several bullets whizzed by me. There was a distinct bus sound as it went by. I think some people were just out plinking in their backyard, adjacent to the lake, and didn't think a backstop was necessary. This also happened to me a few weeks later when I was paddling on a small stream. Bullets whizzed by above the bank, just over my head. I don't think anyone knew I was there either time. Regardless, when you go out and shoot stuff, make sure there's a backstop. FFS. Also, I don't know how big the bullets were, so I'm unsure which was the biggest bullet dodged. As a dead guy, I would be so pissed off to learn my life ended because I was floating in a goddamn boat at the wrong second. Finishing up my paper route when I was a kid. Walking home on the sidewalk next to a busy road with sister on the inside. Me dragging our little buggy on the outside. Middle of winter. Car jumps the curb and takes out our buggy. Neither of us know what the hell had just happened other than the ungodly scraping sound and that our buggy was gone. Find out later that the driver saw us run home scared and brought back our buggy, which was utterly destroyed in a crumpled heap. I was pulling the cart and my hand was on it, so I'm not sure how I avoided eating chrome that day. Not a single scratch on me. I still think about it regularly and it's been over 30 years. Kind of similar. 2000-ish friend and I got some root beers from a store and were walking home. Car jumped the curb, shot across the grass and past the sidewalk and came within inches of hitting me. When the car got back onto the next street over, an old man got out of the car and appeared to be having issues with his legs. Friend and I just continued on our way back to his house, where we told his dad, who said something to the effect of, "I'm going to have to teach you boys how to cross a street safely." I didn't think too much of it until later in life, when I realized A, I didn't do anything wrong. I was 15 feet from the street on the sidewalk, and B, I could have died / seriously injured if the driver was a few more inches to the right. Had a friend who asked if I wanted to move to CA with him and his family. I was 16 and thought it sounded fun. I didn't know at the time, but he was actually rescuing me from my insane mother and a not so happy home life. When you are abused, sometimes it is hard to know you are abused until you become an adult and gain a perspective. I shudder to think what would have happened to me if I had stayed there. That's interesting. Can you elaborate on the situation, if you don't mind? Like, were you close with them? That they'd be okay to live with them in their same house? And if so, are you still close with them? If you don't mind. I was at the Tacoma Mall when the Tacoma Mall shooting happened. Walking right towards where the gunman opened fire when my then fiance decided to go back into a store we were just in. No deuce. The time it took us to get back to the store was the same amount of time it would taken to be right where it all broke out. 10 seconds one direction or 10 seconds in the other. Hearing the screams and gunshots echoing in the mall was crazy. They locked us in the Suncoast video store for a while before having us exit out the back. Edit. I'll add a bit more detail if you're interested. I had run into a person I worked with at the time about 10 minutes before the shooting. I think he went back to Masses and we went to the Suncoast. We were Christmas shopping. The mall was pretty busy. It came down to my fiance remembering she wanted to get someone a series of Friends DVDs. So we headed back, just as we were a few feet from the store. The first cluster of shots rang off, and there was this shared confusion as to WTF was happening. My first thought was gang violence or something. It's Tacoma after all, because it sounded like several people firing at once echoes. If something like this happened today, I'd think potential mass shooter right away. But then it wasn't so much a thing. We had to yell at several women who were still looking around outside the store. Confused. Telling them to shelter inside. Waving them in. My memory might be off, but it felt like maybe 20 to 30 of us crammed in the Suncoast. Them having put the metal gate down and locking it. So we're all in there, just listening to the gunshots and screaming, wondering what was happening. As time went on and the shooting continued, it seemed less likely to be some gang thing as they'd get the F out. So I and others started saying we need to exit the store. He cold shot through the metal gate. Us fish in a barrel. I was spared from seeing anyone who was shot. The coworker I had seen just prior was not so lucky, as he was around several who got hit. It understandably really affected him. He was this tough truck driver dude who doesn't take deuce from anyone. When I saw him and we talked about it, he started crying. Crazy how much pain one person is capable of inflicting. I think about this day a lot. Being spiritual and not religious, I feel like God spared us that day. I'm sorry to hear about others who were adversely impacted by that day. My dad's buddy was one of the people shot at the Tacoma Mall. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year later as a result of his injury. What an awful event. I'm glad you're okay. Edit. To clarify, he did not pass away during the shooting. He passed away about a little over a year later due to complications from his injury. I was 12 when this happened, and not a doctor. so I can't give you a detailed description of how the injury led to complications to his passing. All I know from my dad is he was out Christmas shopping with his wife and was shot in the leg. My dad was pretty torn up after it, and he generally isn't like that, so the event made a lasting impact. Not me but my dad. He traveled to London for work back from 2001-2007. He was booked for the day off on July 7, 2005, as that is my birthday, and the train he normally got to work was one of the ones that was bombed by terrorists. Edit. I wasn't born in 2005, just to clarify. It was just the date I had a birthday on that my dad wanted to spend with me. I think that was the one where people would normally have taken the Piccadilly line changed because of a delay, so a lot of people died due to a fault on the Piccadilly line. The one in front of mine. I have always had a problem with tardiness, him just always running late. I got on my train at Manor House and was evacuated and walking in tunnels with tube staff. I remember being really confused because I was exiting on foot in Euston when I should have been at King's Cross, but people were everywhere. It was pandemonium, so I just tried to get on a bus. My commute used to go straight through central London and out to Hammersmith. On the bus outside Hammersmith, a guy got on with what I realize now was metal detector and was sweeping the seats. When I got to work at a training depot for nurses, all the sisters were in their nursing garb, which wasn't common, and it took a long time for me to discover how narrowly I missed being caught in the bomb. There was only one moment I remember feeling frightened, and that was the trip home again in the evening. That bus ride took forever. My dad was in London for work at the time. I was watching the news, frantically trying to call him and getting no answer. When he finally answered, it turned out he had been engrossed in a conversation with a colleague about some deuce, like what the technical definition of a biscuit was. Totally oblivious. Typical dad moment. I was supposed to hang out with a couple of friends one night. We were going to go to a party that we were all invited to the weekend before. I asked to get off work early so I could go to the party. My manager let me go early, so I went to go find my friends. But I had a really bad feeling all day and it just kept getting worse. Instead of turning left to go to my friend's house, I went right and went home. I found out a few weeks later that they got busted with cocaine in their car. They were 16 and 17 at the time. I was 18. So I would have been screwed. When I was 19, all of my friends decided to take a last minute trip to Canada. I was at work, and even though we were dead, my boss refused to let me leave early so I could go. I was super pissed and was texting my friend pretty consistently until she just stopped answering. I didn't hear from for a couple of days, and then she called me to tell me what happened in Canada. Someone forgot they had mace in their purse, and upon Canadian authorities searching their bags, found said mace. They were all detained and strip searched. The girl's father had to pay a $500 fine before they could be released. To this day, I have never been happier to have had such a female dog of a boss.